الغيرة وتصل بهم الحمية إنه لا سمح الله يروح يغلط، يروح يوقف له شاحنة، يتهاوش مع صاحبها، يعطل له شاحنة. بعدين شو بصير ردة الفعل الأردنية؟ ردة الفعل الأردنية إنه الأردن بلد أمن وأمان، ولن نسمح لأحد بالاقتراب من الشاحنات، ومنعتقل الشباب ومنرمي غاز مسيل للدموع. وهات يا فضيحتنا أمام المجتمع الدولي وشوف الأردن شو بيسوي، بيعتقل المواطنين وبضربهم بالغاز المسيل للدموع مشان يسمح للشاحنات الإماراتية توصل للكيان الإسرائيلي. ستصبح سمعتنا في الطين في الأردن. فإذا هنالك وعي ورشد لدى الحكومة لا يكفي أن تصرح بهذا التصريح، عليها أن تعمل جاهدة أن تمنع دخول هذه الشاحنات. هل الحكومة تملك أن تتخذ إجراء تحمي مجتمعها وتحمي سمعتها وتحمي بلدها؟ نعم تستطيع، نعم تستطيع. أنا اللي بطالب فيه اليوم وزير رئيس الوزراء، وزير الخارجية، وزير النقل، وزير الصناعة والتجارة، وزير الزراعة، كل الجهات المعنية، مدير الجمارك، وزير المالية. إسرائيل مش بحاجة لا 100 شاحنة ولا 200 شاحنة، والحرب رح توقف قريبا بإذن الله. لذلك ما في داعي اليوم الأردن يسود صورته ويسود سمعته ويعمل مشكلة اجتماعية ويعمل أزمة داخلية مشان 100 شاحنة. إسرائيل لا تحتاج 100 شاحنة، لكنها تريد إحراج الأردن. إسرائيل اليوم تريد أن تقول لمجتمعها في الداخل الإسرائيلي ترى احنا محاصرين غزة بس علاقتنا بالإمارات ممتازة، هينا بنصدر وبنستورد. السعودية هي بتسمح بالشاحنات تمر، اوعوا تفكروا انه احنا معزولين. ترى الأردن هيو بمشي، اوعوا تفكروا كلام وزير الخارجية انه يعني بيأذينا، هي بمشوا. هم يريدون إحراج الأردن، وعلى الأردن أن يكون ذكيا سياسيا. الذين منعوا ولي العهد أن يذهب يصلي في المسجد الأقصى في ظل وجود اتفاقية السلام. ما بصير اليوم رئيس الوزراء يقول لك اتفاقية وقواعد قانونية ومش عارف ايش وإمارات وحبايبنا، حبايبنا عراسي من فوق، بنتصل فيهم ومنفهمهم وضعنا بالأردن لا يحتمل. وضعنا بالأردن إذا سمحنا هذا يعني أننا سنحدث فتنة داخلية في الأردن. نقطة أول السطر. إسرائيل تريد إحراجنا، ويمكن كمان إسرائيل ودول أخرى تريد إحراج.
The second reason that this theology developed was anti-Semitic. If the Jews will be in Palestine, they will not be in London. Very simple. And it's a double bill. You get rid of all the Jews you don't want, and you get back the only Jew you do want, Jesus Christ. So, for an evangelical Christian, this is the dream of their life. I mean, they can't ask for more. Not having the Jews and having Jesus with them, who could blame them for being so excited about trips to Israel and of dreaming of the return of the Jews?
שאתה לא מאמין לדובר צה"ל, ועל זה הביקורת העניינית. מה אתה טוען, שדובר צה"ל משקר, נותן מספרים לא נכונים?
אני את המילה משקר לא אגיד, אבל אני אגיד לך שהדיווחים האלה הם דיווחי, שאני קורא להם דיווחי דימוי, ליצור אצל הקהל הרגשת ניצחון עוד לפני שהגענו לניצחון הזה.
לא הבנתי, אתה חושב שאין אלפי מחבלים הרוגים בעזה עכשיו? כמה אתה חושב שיש?
אני לא רק חושב, אני בטוח. אתן לך רק דוגמה לפני יומיים. אני נפגש עם מפקד, הוא אומר לי, אני חודש וחצי נלחם, אנחנו לא הרגנו ולו מחבל אחד, מצאנו מחבלים מתים, כנראה מארטילריה ומטוסים.
These are the same people who are the descendants of the ancient Hebrews. It's their land that they want to keep. They were the ones who were there first. They're the ones being cleansed from their land by the Israeli. They were living there all along. And for generations back into antiquity, when a bunch of Russians and Lithuanians and Germans and New Yorkers showed up and said the land belonged to them. The actual source is David Ben-Gurion himself.
You're saying that Muslims always
had been there. That's right, because here's why. Because when the Muslims came and took over that land, they did not cleanse the land of the people who lived there. And they did not invade it with a giant occupying force to replace them. All they did was take them over and tax them. And then the deal was, if you convert to Islam, you get a tax cut. Basically, you pay less. And the local people all converted to Islam. But so these are the same people who are the descendants of the ancient Hebrews. And the source for this is David Ben-Gurion himself. Ben-Gurion says the ancient Hebrews never left. So you can't take a farmer from his soil. They were there the whole time. And so what was happening was the descendants of the ancient Hebrews who had stayed in Palestine were being replaced by the descendants of the ancient Hebrews who'd gone off to Europe, and then their descendants came home. As though there's no statute of limitations, and 3,000 years later you can come and say, this is my land, you can't live here.
Not a proper Jew, the wrong sort of Jew, self-hating Jew. I was called that for the first time when I was 19 years old at university, where I made a speech in defence of a pro-Palestinian motion. And it was in the Jewish Telegraph. And they front-paged it, this self-hating Jew. She must hate herself when she looks in the mirror. I was 19 years old. I've had people phone me up and say, we're going to put you in a wheelchair, we know where you are, we're outside your door. Probably the worst incident was when I was with my sister at a meeting about anti-Semitism with all Jews on the panel, and people were shouting at us, capos, capos.
You're called traitor Jews, capos.
Capo was a Jewish inmate of a concentration camp who collaborated with the authorities. We're talking people who collaborated in annihilation of their own people. So it's a pretty bad thing to be called. And it's Jews calling other Jews. Not nice. As a Jew on the left, who is intensely anti-racist and intensely aware of what anti-Semitism is and how dangerous it is, to be called an anti-Semite oneself. Marek Edelman, leader of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in 1943, said that Jews should always be with the oppressed and never with the oppressor. I mean, for a section of the population whose history, much that's magical and wonderful, but so much that is to do with persecution, the fact that people with that history should identify with the oppressed in every setting seems self-evident to us. And that's where our support for justice for Palestinians comes in. We are identifying with the oppressed. And for anybody to suggest that it is the Israeli state which represents the oppressed in that conflict is pretty short-sighted and misguided.
Didn't teach you that killing 12,000 babies is pretty fucked up.
It's a shame it's not more.
Oh, it's not a shame it's not more.
It's a shame it's
Oh,
not
yeah?
more.
Oh, this is gonna go everywhere then, you fucking piece of garbage. University of Chicago graduate. He wishes it was more. He wishes it was more. Say it with balls. Say it.
You shouldn't have attacked!
Yeah, now say it.
You
Yes.
shouldn't have
Yeah,
attacked!
how many kids do you want dead? Say it.
As
Say
many as it'll take!
As many as
You will never attack again!
Yes, more.
Go public!
More.
Go
Yes.
public!
Yes, go. Nice.
Go, motherfucker!
Good.
You are
This is
a
what
cancer
Yes,
to the world!
Good, yes.
Cancer
Let
to
it
the
out.
fucking world!
Let it out, yeah. Here we go. This is what we want to see.
That's right!
Perfect.
That's right!
Don't hide that shit.
Never hide it again.
Never hide it.
Never hide
Show
it!
your evil.
Never hide
Show
it!
your evil.
Absolutely!
Exactly.
Next time you come,
Good.
we'll slaughter you!
Oh, yeah. Do it. Oh.
I thought not calling for a ceasefire was the thing I'd see this council do tonight, but locking the doors during a public meeting and gaslighting teenagers is perhaps a new low. I used to want to be many things when I grew up: pilot, labor organizer, freedom fighter. But now I only wish to be one thing. I wish to be like Khalid Nabhani, loving elder, brave man, beautiful human being. For the past 67 days, I've witnessed an unprecedented level of violence, death, and destruction that has only been outshone by a level of humanity and strength I didn't know was possible.
לא שולט על עזה. חמאס הוא לא האויב, אלא עזה חושב חמאס. לכן, חמאס לא הוא האויב, אלא עזה הוא האויב. עכשיו, ברגע שמשנים טרמינולוגיה של האירוע, תפיסת עולם הוא שונה, הגדרת אויב קודם כל הוא שונה, אין משמעות להקש בגג. אין משמעות לתת נון צדק מי יצא, לתת שכונה מי יצא. זה נקרא לשטח. אתה אומר, מה הייתי עושה? רק לשטח. כמה שיותר גופות. כי אישה שם היא אויב. תינוק שם הוא אויב. כיתה באלף הוא אויב. חמוש חמאס הוא אויב. אישה בהיריון הוא אויב. כי אנחנו רואים במו עינינו. אז למה אי אי אפשר לעכל מערביזציה. כי מטשטש אפילו את רמת ההיגיון הבסיסי. למה? כי רואים איזה ילד עם שוקולד ביד, אבל הילד הזה לומד קלצ'ינקוב בכיתה א'. הוא לא ילד, הוא מחבל, אבל ילד.
I had never seen the region as boiling, as implosive, as angry. There is so much hatred, there is so much rage, there is so much anger against both Israel and the United States. My fear is that Gaza could easily become a time bomb that really implodes regional stability. I cannot tell you the extent of popular anger and resentment and rage against the United States.
Can I ask you, how is it that this catastrophe was able to happen? Is there, I mean, obviously Hamas committed it, but did the US take its eye off the ball?
Let me be direct. Biden's foreign policy does not differ very much from Trump's foreign policy. For the past 2 years, this administration has not made any major investment in either trying to stop the building of Jewish settlements or even to try to really bring about the establishment of a Palestinian state. It pays lip service to the idea of a two-state solution. What did the Biden administration do in the past 1 year? It has tried to build up on Trump's deal of the century, bring about normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And why? Because in the back of the mind of the Biden administration and the Netanyahu government, normalization with Saudi Arabia would mean the end of the Arab-Israeli conflict. The underlying Christianity, the underlying idea in the administration, in the Biden administration, and Benjamin Netanyahu, is that the Palestinians can be managed, the Palestinians can be controlled, the Palestinians can be subjugated. Why should we invest in the peace process?
Those who try very hard to extract from people like me, from DiEM25, a condemnation of the attack by the Hamas guerrillas will never get it. And they will never get it for a very simple reason. Those who care about humans without any discrimination, those who care equally about a Jew and an Arab, must ask themselves a very simple question. What exactly is their idea of the cessation of hostilities? That Palestinians are going to lay down their arms and go back into the largest open-air prison in the world, where they are constantly suffocated by the apartheid state? In other words, back in South Africa, in the era of apartheid, what was the problem? Was it that some members of the black resistance, including the ANC, but not only the ANC, took up arms against the South African regime and sometimes killed innocent people? Was that the problem with apartheid? No, the problem was apartheid. Apartheid, whether it's practiced in South Africa or in Palestine or Israel, is always going to procure violence because it's a violent, misanthropic system. Any human being living under apartheid at some point will either die a terrible silent death or rebel and often take innocent people with them. The criminals here are not Hamas, not even the Israeli settlers who are killing Palestinians. The criminals are Europeans, us, every single member of our German society, our French society, our Greek society, our United States society.
Journalists, why did they murder a woman and her daughter in the Holy Family Church, Roman Catholic Church in Gaza today? For the same reason. They don't fit the narrative. After all, if all of Gaza is Hamas, and if Hamas is ISIS, how could there be a Roman Catholic Church in Gaza? How could there be some of the oldest Christian churches anywhere in the world in Gaza? How could they still be open? How could people still be praying? How could people be taking communion? How could people be confessing in these Roman Catholic churches? So out with them, kill them, burn them, bomb them. And they have killed, burned, and bombed one church after another in Gaza. Why do I dwell on it? I dwell on it because this Christmas time, hundreds of millions of Christians will be revering the birth of the baby, Jesus Christ. Where? In Palestine, in Bethlehem. Have you seen Bethlehem? Do you know that Bethlehem is a town under siege, blocked off by roadblocks, surrounded by Israeli soldiers, regularly raided, people regularly murdered there? Don't you care about that? Is all this Jesus stuff, all this Christmas stuff for you purely performative? Or does it matter to you that in the Holy Land Satan is at work? Satanic forces are murdering women and children and old men and journalists, bombing churches, attacking hospitals.
Hamas has a position in Palestinian politics that is not going to be eradicated no matter what Israel does in Gaza. If Israel entirely defeats Hamas's entire military network of infrastructure, if it kills every single fighter, these are of course probably unrealistic, but even assuming that they can do that, Hamas continues as a political movement. Hamas continues to have support among Palestinians, not majority support according to almost every poll I've ever seen, but a certain amount of support. There is no way to exclude Hamas from that. This idea that Hamas, because of what it did on October 7th, is completely excluded from Palestinian governance is a fantasy, an Israeli, American, European fantasy. You do not negotiate with the people who have already agreed to your terms. You couldn't do that in Ireland. You had to bring the IRA in. You couldn't do that in South Africa. You had to bring the ANC in. You couldn't do that in Algeria. You had to bring the FLN in. These are groups that had carried out horrific attacks, in many cases on civilians. These are groups that were described by the colonial power in South Africa, in Algeria, in Ireland, as terrorists or bandits, or they had different terms at different times. But the only people you really need to negotiate with are the people with the guns, after all. And until that fact gets through the thick skulls of people in Washington and in Paris and London, we're not going anywhere.
Americans are doing the opposite of profiting when it comes to our relationship and foreign policy with Israel. Funding the Iron Dome, hundreds of billions of dollars. I can connect what's going on in Ukraine with Israel. You can connect everything back to Israel. And so we're just unquestionably, you're not allowed to criticize it. You're not allowed to ask a question, just funding and dumping money and sending military assets and resources and battleships and protecting this, most fortified border on the face of planet Earth while we orchestrate and implement and carry out a physical invasion of our own country. And so when I ask that, call it who you want to. If the Chi-Coms that Alex seems to be very afraid of, or the Muslims that Alex seems to be very obsessed with, that's another thing that he liked to say, I'm obsessing, which was, to me, that was gaslighting. I'm not obsessing, I'm identifying an obvious occupation of every single government installation and institution in the United States and in our media, and it's the one enemy that you're not allowed to name. If the Chi-Coms were at our border and they were invading us, everybody would go, oh my God, the Chinese are invading us and we need to go to war with China. If the same thing with, what did he say, Venezuela or the French, they're not occupying our government. They don't dictate U.S. foreign policy, and they're not soaking the taxpayer for hundreds of billions of dollars. Why can't we name this enemy? What makes them so untouchable?
Children of Gaza and the children of the West Bank don't need a state. We have 22 Arab states I'm not so proud of. Why add another one? We have enough garbage in the Middle East.